We're not looking at nitrogen or any of those things, we're purely concentrating on phosphorus. We're comparing liquids, two forms of liquids, polyphosphate and phosphoric acid. The high analysis granular was MAP, and the biological product was a rock phosphate. Before I get started, I just want to, the reason we put this trial in, it's not actually a funded trial. The local growers just really wanted some information on this. It's been running for about 3 years now, so we've had 2 wheat crops and 1 canola crop. It was obviously due to the drought that I assume you guys have all shared that experience as well, and the fairly volatile fertiliser prices where the local growers are really trying to get a better handle on what are some of the options actually out there. So the specific question that the local growers and also the local agros were after was, can rates be reduced when we're using liquids? We're hearing of these cases down in South Australia on the calcareous soils where they're getting some good responses. How are they going to work in our local soil types? Also, do liquids allow us the opportunity to split P application, a bit like what we do with nitrogen, where we put some up front and then some later in the season? Obviously that goes against current protocol. With the rock phosphates, will they release enough P to provide for crop requirements? So theoretically your rock phosphates need an acid soil and a high rainfall environment for them to break down. We don't have acid soils and we're not normally in a high rainfall environment. We are at the moment, but not normally. Also, how important is it to use a microbe-friendly seed treatment when you're using a biological program? Some of the biological advocates are discouraging the use of fungicide seed treatments, as that's basically going to nuke the bugs in the soil, which will therefore reduce the ability of that rock phosphate product to actually break down and become available to the plant. So how important is that? But the biggest question that they're wanting some information on, which form of P is the most cost effective? So how did we go about it? We had 2 trial sites. We had one at Peak Hill and one at Goondiwindi. The Peak Hill is probably a more common soil type for our area. It's got a pH of 5.5 on the top, that's calcium chloride. It's got moderate P levels of 25 and it's got a PBI of 58. The majority of our soil types fit between 40 and 70 as far as PBI is concerned. Then we've got for us, it's our heavy cracking clay. I don't know how you guys are, I'm sure there's probably a lot heavier up here, but it's a cracking clay. It's got a pH of 7.5 on the top soil. It's only got a Col P of 15, so it should theoretically be a highly responsive site, and it's got a PBI of 106. Key point is here on this Goondiwindi site, it's a heavy cracking clay. We did a deep ripping trial there a couple of years ago. There's also free lime present in the topsoil. You know, nothing like the South Australians, but there is a bit of free lime in the topsoil. At each trial site location, we actually ran 2 trials at each site. We had a product trial and a systems trial. The product trial is where all the seed was treated with, so for the wheat it was all treated with Raxil. When we did canola it was treated with Jockey and Gaucho. The systems trial is when we allowed the various fertiliser companies the ability to use their recommended seed treatment. So the key aim was, do we have to adopt the full nutrition program of that system for that particular product to work? That kind of makes sense? It can be a bit, yep. So here are the products that we've used. MAP, our biological was a biologically activated rock phosphate. And then these are our 2 forms of liquids. We used a phosphoric acid and a polyphosphate. Look, I know a lot of you guys are advisors, so you're already aware of this, but this is trials really pitched for the local growers. And the key thing is the cost. So we can see, you know, these prices are higher than what they are at the moment, but $950 a tonne for MAP. The rock phosphates, you know, at that time was $775 a tonne. So it's cheaper per tonne, but per unit of P, it's quite a lot dearer. So we just need to make sure that growers are aware to calculate cost per unit of P. So the MAP's got 22% P, therefore came out around $4.32, compared to the rock phosphate, cheaper per tonne, but unit for unit, it's twice as expensive, basically. So it's a fairly key point. And also the liquids, you know, we're looking at around $14 per unit of P. So it's just a matter of every year calculating cost per unit of P rather than dollars per tonne. Another fairly key point as well is if you're going to go with something like rock phosphate, 12% P, if you normally get a semi-load of fertiliser, you're going to need to get 2 semi-loads of fertiliser to actually buy that product. So obviously freight, logistics, it's actually going to be reasonably expensive. Just another way of looking at it is also what's the break-even yield to cover those costs. Now, look, these are you can see the assumptions I've got here for costs. Do your own, basically, as far as what you can actually buy it for. You know, $185 a tonne is obviously also a bit on the higher side. So, but you can get the point. 20 units of MAP, the break-even yield was around 0.4, 0.5 tonne to the hectare. The same sort of thing with our liquids. We're looking at around 1.5 tonnes to the hectare just to actually cover that cost. So big differences. So obviously if you're going to select buy less P for that same dollar value, you really want to be sure that it's going to be more efficient in actually converting into yield. As far as the additional products used in the systems trial, for the rock phosphate treatment, for their seed treatment, we put on a broad spectrum inoculant of compost microbes. Then we also put on a foliar spray where we put another broad spectrum inoculant of compost microbes on it. For the polyphosphate treatment, we put on a seaweed extract, it was Kelpak, and a zinc seed treatment. And we also put on Raxil because they weren't too concerned about actually having the fungicide actually applied on the seed. Now, this is current district practice is MAP, and pretty much everybody's putting on either a Raxil or whatever it is. So, and this is what we're wanting to compare it to. Growers are wanting to know, do we need to change? So the MAP and the phosphoric acid, those particular companies are not saying that you need to not use that for their fertiliser to work. So that's why we're doing it like that. Before I go through and look at the economics and the yield results, basically I just got the local agros and also the growers involved in actually scoring the plot. The key aim was I wanted to get them involved early in actually monitoring the crop. So they didn't just come to the spring field day or the pre-season meeting, but they've got a visual idea of what the crop looked like, early in the season, later in the season, and then they got the yield results. I gave them a score, a sheet. Everybody got a sheet, and they had to go and assess each plot and give it a score between 1 and 10. 1 looked terrible, low vigour. 10 looked fantastic. High vigour. 5 was obviously about an average. Now, it's pretty crude, but really I just wanted to see, can the growers, they've normally got pretty good observation skills, can they pick up visual differences amongst the treatments, and can they consistently see visual differences? Because there's 4 reps of each treatment. Did they actually pick it up? Just to calibrate yourself, that got a score of 3, that got a score of 5, and that got a score of 8. So this is at the peak hill site, so it's a more common soil type, PBI of around, I think it was around 58, something like that. The rates that we had, we applied it on at 5 units, 10 units and 20 units of P, and here's our actual vigour score. So firstly, was the site responsive to phosphorus? Yeah, it looks so. It seems that the higher the rate went, people could start to see a bit of a difference. The rock phosphate, well, didn't go so well. Like it was a fairly flat response. They couldn't see a great visual difference between the rock phosphate and the nil. As far as seeing visual differences between the MAP and either of the 2 liquid products, they both seemed to respond quite well, but they couldn't pick up any visual differences. Now, if we go to the Goondiwindi site, this is the site that's got a bit of free lime in it. Look, it's still, it's a heavy clay, cracking clay, but it's nothing like South Australia. What could they see there? Look, the rock phosphate, same trend. They couldn't tell any difference between 20 units of rock phosphate and the nil. The blue line is always MAP in any of these graphs. Now, that's our current district practice, so we're wanting to see where everything else fits with that blue line. The MAP and the phosphoric acid liquid, yeah, both responded really positively, but the polyphos certainly did just have the edge on it. It just gave a bit of a cocky summed it up perfectly. He said, look, it just has the freshest look. It just sort of had a nice, fresh, thick leaf. It didn't convert into extra tillers or anything like that, but it certainly gave a nice visual response.
What's pH on the site?
Yeah, pH of 7.5 on the topsoil, and then it gets more alkaline at depth. Like as in 8.5, 9, when the actual lime actually gets more at depth. So, it's a cracking clay. I'm just going to show you the yield results from the Goondiwindi site over the last 3 years. And there you can see we've got a bit of free lime. That's after we put the deep ripping on a different trial, and you can see a bit of the free lime there. So back in 2009 when we first started it, it was a shocker of a year. We started with moderate moisture levels at sowing, and basically we got very low in-crop rainfall. Many of the crops in the area didn't actually get harvested due to drought. So, but that's life, that's what the growers, that happened. So there was no significant difference amongst any of the treatments there. 2010, well, it was the complete opposite. We had an absolute cracker of the year where moisture was never unlimiting. We ended up getting a 20% yield increase from P. Again, you can see the same sort of trend. The rock phosphate, just a very flat response. As for the other products, the liquids, both liquids and the MAP, yep, responded positively. No significant difference actually amongst it. Do remember that the polyphos still looked, you know, monitoring it throughout the year, the polyphos always seemed to just look a little bit better. Everybody comes away with that observation. But it didn't actually convert into yield. Now, last year, we put it down to canola, and we had really good stored moisture levels at sowing, but we ended up getting like decile 3 in-crop rainfall. So it was actually quite a harsh year for us there. However, we ended up getting a 60% yield increase from phosphorus. Finally, we're starting to see that rock phosphate, you know, it's starting to break down over 3 years. It's starting to actually release a little bit. But again, you can see that the MAP, the blue line, and the phosphoric acid all responded positively. The polyphos, again, look, you can see a slight trend that it was maybe slightly better, but it actually didn't come out, you know, statistically significant as such. So really, there was no difference actually above the treatments. So the big question for the growers is then, well, rightio, you know, it's all about economics. And they really want me to actually report it this way: dollar return for every dollar invested. So back in 2011, last year, we got $12 return for the MAP when we put on 5 units. We ended up getting around $7 return for every dollar invested with the 10 units. You know, you can see for yourself. The MAP went very well. The liquids, while the liquids worked well, it was purely just the cost that actually made them not profitable as such. And the rock phosphate, well, obviously it just didn't, it was dear and it didn't work. Oh, well, it did work a little bit. I better make sure, but you know, nowhere near as effective as such.
Do you think over 10 years you'll finally get it up there? Or?
Oh, I'm hoping the growers don't want it to go for 10 years. But look, I suppose that's the question, like, as in how long does it take to actually break down? Like, we've actually had, our summers have been the wettest summers that we've had over the last couple of years, and this year's going to be no different. So I suppose it's that, you know, I'm trying to use just logic here, but wet summers, and we also get the temperature, it's probably had ideal conditions to break down, if that makes sense, which aren't really normal for us, generally speaking. Yeah. But I don't, as far as how long it'll take, does anybody else, a chemist in the room, or has anybody else got experience with? I wouldn't have thought that.
There's a very good Victorian Department of Ag report that went, you know, it was a 20-year study, and it takes a very long time. Yeah, and the thing that we're getting at as well is the cost of it. It's not actually cheap as such per unit P. So did things change if we adopt the full system? Did some of, like, for example, the rock phosphate, did it become more profitable if we didn't use the Raxils and those sort of fungicide seed treatments? And you can see, yeah, the system one. Basically, it's no, you know, you can see for yourself, it's made no difference in this particular trial as far as making it more profitable. So as far as the gross margin over the last 3 years, so we've had a drought, we've had a cracker of a year where it only yielded like a 20% yield increase, and this last year, you know, the MAP came out in front. I haven't actually included all the costs in this. So one of the local growers that has been set up for liquids, it cost him about $80,000 to actually set his machinery up to do it. Now, I'm not going to argue whether you can do it cheaper or dearer, but that's just how much it actually costed some of them. But you can see the trend. MAP, really the options that we have is we can put on 20 units of MAP, 10 units of MAP. They're getting the highest gross margin. The low rate of polyphos has gone, the difference between there and there, the majority of growers in our area putting in about 1,000 hectares in. So it's about, you know, $65,000 difference over that period of time, and things have been pretty tough, so every dollar basically counts. But the question that we had was, well, rightio, if we do decide to go for a low rate of liquid, what's going to be the long-term implications of that regarding our soil residual phosphorus levels? So we were lucky enough to go through and soil test each plot last year. So it's only had 2 years. Yeah, so I did the soil testing this time last year before sowing. I need to acknowledge Sean Mason from Adelaide Uni actually did all the soil testing for us. So we looked at the DGT, the coal and the resin test, but I'll only put up the coal test here. Look, basically the nil plots were around 15 as far as the coal P levels. We can see that the polyphos, the low rate, was around 18, close to 19, but the MAP was up around the 22. So obviously the MAP, it came highest in the gross margin. It also actually gave us the better residual value as well. So if you do decide to go for a liquid, you're going to be depleting your soil phosphorus reserves. I don't think there's anything really that rocket science in there. Yep. Question?
You were using about 100 kilos of MAP, is that right?
Yeah, at that rate it would have been, yeah.
So it's pretty much double what we use in this part of the world in general terms.
Yep.
What are your comments on the options if we're doing that style? Around that 5 to 10 kilos a peat.
Well, that's the 10 kilos there. So that's the 20 kilos. So the 10 kilos would be around 50 kilos of MAP there. So you can see the trend. It's starting to, compared to the only putting on 25 kilos of MAP, where we put on 10, we're starting to get a build-up of P. But the liquids, the polyphos, it does seem to have a bit of a residual. There does seem to be getting a bit better residual. Like, again, it didn't come out that statistically significant, but you can see a bit of a trend there. Yeah. So in conclusion, look, we can't control the season, but we can control how much we actually throw at the crop. Each season is going to be unique, and who knows what's going to actually happen this year. 2009, it started well, but it was a drought year. Some of our crops didn't get harvested. 2010, well, had a great start, but then some of us had to re-sow crops due to some locust damage, and then other areas of Forbes ended up getting a late frost. It happens. 2011 was also a fantastic start, but we had to re-sow a lot of our canola due to the mice damage, low in-crop rainfall, and then it rained at harvest. So we really want to select a pea fertiliser that's cheap, and we know it works. Basically, it's probably nothing more than that. And remember, if you do decide to buy less P for that same dollar value, just remember the future implications of that regarding your residual P levels.